had worked talk about what they had learned from working on arms so that the people that were worked on would get a better sense of what the people who did the work saw. And what I'd like at this point is to have the people who were worked on talk about what they learned about by being worked on to the people who did the work.
Well, that's a good project.
Who got worked on? Bob, how would you like to talk about what did you learn about arms in general from your experiences?
In the first place, let's ask a general question of how much more did people learn about arms yesterday? Anyone like to answer?
I learned quite a lot.
Good. How about the rest of you?
And I was saying I think the reason I learned so much is giving freedom in the broad scope to do that much work on the arm. I never have the confidence, I don't think, on a night session to do quite that much work.
Well, in the night session, you couldn't get that far along. What you were doing yesterday was working on something that had been prepared for the night session, weren't you?
Yes.
One of the things
I think, Andy, maybe you should remember this. I think what should be done is that we should speak to the teachers, because I think in general we've let those arms be stepchildren. There are lots of reasons why this has been so, but I really feel that you get to the 10th hour and you really know very little about arms. I think maybe we should look to revising this. Okay.
One of the things that I had learned in Andy's question of asking us what we learned by doing the general discussion made me intellectualize what I think I saw yesterday that I had just mentioned before you came in, and I'll mention it again, that I felt like you led me very, very well in discovering something, which was that with a little bit of work on Sharon's arms, and then going to her spine and her ribs, I mean, it made the aberrations that work in the arm, made the aberrations in that spine and the ribs so obvious and so available. It wasn't hidden by what had been done through the shoulders and arms.
This is often the case.
And the way
that the arms, you see, the arms have taken over the hiding of what has gone wrong in the trunk itself. And one of the things that never ceases to fascinate me in this world is to see how people who haven't the foggiest ideas that they are aberrant manage to subconsciously do something to hide their aberrance from their neighbors. You watch it and you'll be surprised too. They don't even know that that word applies to them. And yet unconsciously they have compensated in such a way that people will not see it, as Sydney is recording right now.
I feel it's not only cosmetic, but it's connected with many aberrations. There's a very low threshold, or very low level kind of pain. And that there was one word in your first sentence that I didn't hear. You said, I feel that it's not always... Not only cosmetic.
Oh, cosmetic.
Cosmetic or social. But there's a kind of low level of pain that, and I know from my own experience, I've experienced as things straighten out, I feel I get back into certain kinds of pain and so forth. And it's clear to me that I probably never even consciously sense these pains. That the compensations come in because as soon as I or someone else
trying to deal with it,
you try to squirm away from it. You squirm into a different position. You don't even know it consciously, unconsciously, definitely.
Thanks, Larry, and you don't know how I need that.
It doesn't register, and as a result, we're constantly like an oyster making a pearl.
That's a very good thought. I mean, it's a significant thought. And it really, there's no question that it operates in many, many cases. But as Rolf is, you see, I am calling to your attention the fact that you have not had enough training on arms. And in a way, I'm blaming us as teachers, but I can't blame us too much because it's a question of time.
Also availability?
Perhaps, but it's a question of time. We just don't have you long enough. If, for instance, we were running a school and each one of you had to come to that school every day for three years, we could afford to be much more fussy in what you knew. But you see, we don't have the time for that, and we can't get the time because we don't have the money. And so the merry-go-round goes round and round and round and round. But the only trouble is it does not come out here. It doesn't come out anywhere. It just keeps going round. And so it behooves you people to be sufficiently mature to understand these problems and yourselves to try to compensate for them. And of course you can. You can by going back to your books and seeing the kind of thinking which has given rise to this work in general and keep applying it to corners where it is unclear in your mind. It's the only way I can suggest. Thank you. Any of you got any comment on that? Any of you say, well, I have found it very useful to do so and so. You see, the trouble with you people, and I don't mean this as too personal, I mean you people as a generation coming up, is that you are used to having everything laid out for you. In schools, in classes, everything is laid out for you. You are expected to know so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and you are not expected to know this and this and this and that. And very young you learn this. But surprisingly enough, life ain't like that. And the things that you don't know in the real life are the things that defeat you. And yet, as you come out of the education which we as a culture give you, we haven't told you that. We may have told it to you in words, but we haven't made it apparent to you in deeds. And you're big boys now, and it's pretty near time you grab hold of this fact. And you realize that it's you who have to go to these sources. And the sources are not always books. Your sources are definitely not. Only occasionally books. You've heard me say over and over again, we've got to rewrite the books. I think you're beginning to understand what I'm talking about.
I found that at the end of the Rolf training, the basic training, that it was a point of departure, so I could discover on my own things like armor.
It's the only way you ever learn. The only way you ever learn. In saying that, I am damning us as teachers. But if that's the facts, those are the facts. I can't help it. And what we are trying to do with you people is send you out as independent workers looking and looking and looking. And when you find something that is really significant, don't keep it to yourself. Bring it out, lay it on the table, invite discussion, write it up. It's the only way we can learn.
Although at times, Dr. Rolf, I feel like I'm caught in the broken record syndrome about this of writing it up and what you're saying right now. I still, one of the things I appreciate the most about, I think the Rolf training is the along with the training comes all of the unknowns and how much is still unknown. And I think that's, to me, what was lacking in early education in both education and religious training is that everything was taught as known. That almost everything was supposed to be known. It was a question of learning all of these known things. And the unknown was covered up. And
well, of course, religious training is a special ground by itself. Let's not get into that one.
Well,
but I agree.
War training does give you the opportunity to go out and see what you do know.
Well, but there's one
you find out what you don't know.
Our training shows you the raw data to which people have always had to go in order to get a theory that they can put into a book. And we're sending you back to the raw data level. And we're trying to teach you how to deal with raw data and to see that because John Jones says that that raw data leads him to believe so-and-so, that isn't necessarily what that raw data is going to tell Susie Smith or you. And oddly enough, this is the world we live in, and very few people ever call your attention to that fact. You got something on your mind?
No, ma'am.
That's Bob over there, isn't it?
Yes.
So that this is the reason why when I come in here in the morning, I don't make a great to-do over just pouring words out and expecting you to hear them. I let you sit and fret for a little while. How are we going to talk about it? What do we know? Because this is what living learning is about. And I don't know, other than this, how to train a whole large group of human beings who are then being sent out as teachers, not labeled as teachers, but you are teachers. You're teachers in the way you deal with your life and in the way that the people whom you attract as clients see you dealing with your life. And if you deal with it very poorly, believe me, they're smart enough to know it. And all of this requires attention on your part. You've never had the time to give it the attention before, because always somebody's been dumping stuff into your head at such a rate that you haven't had the time to think about it. So, God bless the world.
If you're going back to what you said yesterday about having an instinct for organization, then it would seem that we have to be organized ourselves in order to.
Oh, there's no question about that. There's no question about that, and there's no question about the fact that a disorganized Ralph can't put his message across. And there's also no question about the fact that a man who is disorganized in his life, I'm trying to think of exceptions to this statement right now, and I can't find any, will not be organized in his presentation.
Or his work.
Or his work. And this whole business of Rolfing is really an attempt at organizing the basic stuff of life, of your life.
Seems to me there's a complementarity there. There's the standard image of the absent-minded professor.
Yeah.
Was so involved in his physics that he can't get his laundry done.
That's right.
Professor Lycum, certainly he can be very organized in his and very rigorous in his experimentation.
There's only a very limited field in which he's organized, though. You see, he has to find a field, and within that field he's organized.
This is why it's funny, because instinctually we know this is incongruent. Don't you think so?
And instinctively we laugh at that man. Yeah, it's true.
Our knowledge is very small too, but it's a Rolfer goes out with a very specialized piece of knowledge.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that
A
last.
Rolfer goes out with a very specialized piece of knowledge.
Piece of knowledge. I heard it as coming in as economics, and that didn't make sense.
Well, a Rolfer may be very disorganized in his economics. To see the.
Well, I'm not sure that he can be to then still be a good Rolfer, because organization is something that goes through a unit, be it a man or an organization or a club or what have you. If there's organization there, it goes right through the unit. If there's no organization there, the disorganization is apparent in every member. It's again the holistic theory.
Good. Then our lack of ability to attract money would be some.
There's some reason why we're not attracting money. There's some good reason why we're not attracting money, and I haven't found out yet what it is, but I know that it's there.
Have you ever thought that it might be preservative in some way?
Right. Yeah, and it may be a question of protecting us.
Yeah.
You see, if somebody tomorrow gave us $3 million, we'd get so involved in spending it that we would not have the time to sit down and really look at what we're doing.
Yeah, I think everybody would come out of the woodwork then.
That's right, and they'd all try to be getting some of that money away from us. And we'd be so busy protecting ourselves and protecting our money and so forth and so forth. I thoroughly agree that not having money has certain advantages. On the other hand, it has certain very serious inconveniences.
Well, if we were that well organized, then what we would do would be to create just the amount of money where that wouldn't happen. So we have
Talk realities, Danny, huh? This is good theory, but very poor reality.
Well, a couple of 100,000 we could spend really easily on the building. But on the same basis, we have to have greater degree of organization as an organization.
That's right.
Before you even know what to do with your money.
That's true.
I am,
It would seem to me.
I agree.
I am relating to what Jason said yesterday with the little model that we were talking about. You had a totally kinesthetic energy level in human being, and we got the conclusion of when you have a totally rational man, and then Jason went, but then what are you going to do with a rational man in an irrational world? And I think some of what we're doing, if we look at it on an organization level, could be that too. I mean, we are...
Don't talk quite so fast, Sydney. It doesn't get across to me.
Okay. We are building organization, but we are still working within a world that is basically disorganized, at least in terms of in our terms.
That's true.
So
and you see, it's rather hard for you people to understand what is really going on, what I hope is really going on in this room. That literally you people are being trained to go out into the world as shining lights, hopefully shining. Not simply as professionals doing a professional job, but as somebody who by your living pattern is going to exert pressure for change on people. And I think there are people in this room probably who could quote you chapters and verse on changes that have occurred in other people's lives because they have seen the organization that goes on in the lives of some Rolfers. I'm sure that's so. Could myself, I really excited myself. But you see, what I'm driving at now is trying to make you conscious of your role. There aren't many people trained with this goal in the world. There are a number of people who by instinct have a certain degree of organization, and they go out and by contamination, so to speak, succeed in organizing other people. But there are a great many, there's room for many more. And I'd like you people to see that you are creating organization in this world. And I don't mean creating organizations. I mean creating organization in this world. And that is your job. Your job is not to earn $40 or $50 an hour, Rolfing. That is only incidental. So how do you feel about it? Do you think you're equipped to do it?
Absolutely.
not equipped but dedicated.
Not?
Not wholly equipped, yet definitely dedicated.
Okay. That's the first important step. It's the first important step.
Dr. Rolfe, we have two models this morning.
Yeah?
Adrian and Francis. And before I bring Adrian in, I wondered if you would like to say any last few words about arms, elbows, and shoulders.
Well, I think Adrian is a very good subject to bring in for that.
Sure.
All right, then let's take a 5-minute break.
Now, wait a minute. I don't want to do this talking when Adrian is in here.
All right, fine.
But Adrian is such an outstanding model of an ectomorph. Absolutely outstanding model of an ectomorph, and Francis is an outstanding model of an endomorph. Look at it in that sense. look at the unbelievable length of the joints of Adrian's arms and what she can do with them. They've got to be that long in order to match her body. But be aware of what that does to her body in terms of what it permits her to do, what it forces her to do, and how she has to use her body for it. She has a very good body. She has a much better body than most ectomorphs. And intuitively, she uses it much better than most ectomorphs. Perhaps because she's had rolfing experience, I don't know. I didn't know her in the earlier days.
No, she wasn't like that before she started.
She wasn't? Do you have a picture?
Real disorganized. Yeah.
She still has very poorly organized legs.
Yeah.
And I keep telling her to go back to Bob, who did her first 10, and get them organized, but nothing happens. I don't know whether I'll get Bob on the job doing it this morning, then I'll know it'll be done. You will also notice that as you look at Adrian, and you particularly as you look at the back of her lower legs, and her uppers, but mostly her lowers, they have what used to be termed that typical female contour. And this is a bit surprising in a person who is so atypical as Adrian. Observe these things. The problem is in teaching a class like this, as you understand, that I see many things and do not dare to say them in the presence of the model. Because every last model you'll ever have picks up every word that you have that is uttered in her presence and takes it home and discusses it with all the neighbors. And she doesn't discuss it in context. And so she gets filled with notions. And this is another one of the problems of office. You cannot say what you think. It doesn't make any difference how extensive you modify your words. You cannot say what you think, because they do not have the kind of background that you have. And it seems to be a law, a cosmic law, that they pick up every word and try it on everyone and everywhere for size. And it does a great deal of damage, and I'm sure some of you can quote those kinds of damage. So, okay, let's get on the job of Adrian. Oh yeah, Francis isn't here yet.
Francis won't be here by 11.
He'll be here close to 11 as he gets here.
Really?
Okay, let's get hold of Adrian.
Let's take a 5-minute break.
All right. My next reincarnation, I'm going to be a cat. Fly on wings of flame. Bedbug has no wings at all, but he gets there just the same. So I have to put my wings away.
Sharon Staggs is here with us.
Oh, good. Oh, there she is. Good.
We're trying to see that if someone was laying on the table in a flat position and their pelvis seat and their legs that were higher than the pelvis, whether or not it was most usual that they would be short in the psoas or on the top of the pelvis to the side, or whether that shortness was coming from the ischial-tuberosities in the hamstring.
Well, again, I think that depends, doesn't it?
Well, that's right. That's what we discovered.
But it was informative, even though you can't generalize, it's been informative looking at different people and the different
Okay, I'm all with you. I'm all for you. I think you're being really intelligent, strangely enough.
Apparently said that as well.
Does anyone else want to try it?
Does this mean intelligent? No.
Not now.
in my notes here, the same intelligent as possible for all this.
Well,
New level.
I have another subject that I would really like to discuss if we feel complete with this one. Is there anyone who wants to talk a little more about the triangle and the legs?
No, but I would like to ask Dr. Rolfe what I asked Andy, and that is, many times when people are laying on the table and you look at them and you say, that manish is 6 cervical is too far forward, or there's no movement in this atlas axis, or you're talking about the cervical. And I don't have any trouble understanding what you're saying or seeing what you're saying, but it seems to me that it might be beneficial to have landmarks with the relationship of the head to the neck. And I wondered, I'd asked Andy that in chiropractic school, if they taught people that directly behind the mouth is the atlas axis, and behind the tip of the chin is the 3rd or 4th cervical, and so forth. I wondered if you would have any training or observation about it. Do you have any generalities? When you look at the tip of the chin, does that mean anything to you with the relationship to the cervical?
You talking to me?
Yes.
I don't see the tip of the chin. I don't know how I know it's the 3rd or 4th cervical.
You just perceive
It's
it.
not a rational process with me.
It's just something you perceive.
It's just something that's there.
Uh-huh.
Do I know that your eyes are blue if I look at them? No. You know, I mean, it's there.
Would you teach us how to do that, Dr. Rolfe, this morning?
I beg your pardon.
I was just saying, making a joke due to my own frustration behind the whole matter. I was just asking you to teach us how to do that this morning, if you would.
Yeah, that's today and tomorrow and the next day.
You each take a placebo. And
But I do insist that after you struggle with it a while, you'll have it. There's no problem about that. And it's not a question of intelligence. It's a question of some other method of learning which we don't ordinarily look at and we don't ordinarily try to analyze. We're not analytical about it.
Seriously, do you think that it's not something that you had when you first began this work?
I don't think so.
Something that developed.
I don't think so. I think it just happens that if you're interested in this and you keep looking at it, you see it. I don't think everyone will see it. But I think many people will see it. And of course there will be selectives. I remember, for example, how surprised I was when Dick Demery was maybe 14 years old. He came in and I was washing dishes one very hot day, getting ready to move and all this and that, and you know, the usual stuff that piles up moving. And I was really beat. And as I stood there at the sink, I was complaining that, oh, my back was killing me. And he came over and he put his hand right on it and he says, yeah, there it is. This was a 14-year-old kid that had never had any training about it. He just had that aptitude for seeing. Now, I don't think his brother would see that even today.
Knowing the two, I would agree.
Because his brother sees things and doesn't see people. He sees people and doesn't see things. Now, this is some endowment that you have. Where you get it, I don't know. Okay, got some other questions that'll lead us off into a...
Yes. Yes, Dr. Rolfe, I have.
Okay, I'm listening.
The other day, about a week ago, I said something about seeing in the advanced sessions more of the areas that you had talked about as being the chronic areas where a person will shorten. If a person is going to shorten, these are the areas that they will. And I mentioned the iliacus and groin, and Andy came over to me afterwards and said, why don't you go back through your notes and make a list of those places that Dr. Rolfe has mentioned that would be chronic shortening areas. And put that clearly, that was the only one I could find, was the iliacus through the groin.
Well, obviously, the iliacus through the groin is going to be a critical area because that's where two great parts of the body join.
I went on to...
Obviously, for the knees are going to be a similar area, but much less apparent, less obvious, less frequent.
I went on to add that My own guess is, well, I've heard you say about the second and third rib frequently jamming together, which I guess you could consider a shortness.
Well, you see, that's our tendency to do this.
Right. And I also included the quadratus lumborum.
Yeah, the quadratus lumborum is a mixed blessing. You see, it shortens, yeah, but it also goes forward or backward in the shortening. You know what I mean? I mean, there's two directions to be taken into consideration there, not merely this and this, but this and this.
Also seems to get obtuse as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But you see, it's worth stopping and thinking at this point about these things, because you do get additional and more light on them.
I have a question, and that is, it just occurred to me that in that movement of the quadratus, when you have someone that has a severe scoliosis, like Julie Washington, for instance, and that rib, that 12th rib, is really wrapped, almost distorted in its shape, and it's dragging the quadratus, does that, or can that really affect digestion because of the pressure that it puts on them?
Sure it can. Of course it can. How can it not is what I would ask you.
It's amazing to me that someone like Tweed functions as well as he does. Really? With those ribs folded way under. And
I agree, and you'll go through life being amazed at this kind of thing that comes up every so and so often.
But I asked her if she doesn't have any digestive problems, and I don't think her endurance, I don't think she would run a whole lot too far, but she certainly puts in a long day. Hard work.
She seems to be a woman with a lot of stamina.
Did she have any comment concerning your question?
I'm missing what you're asking.
You see, very often people as young as she is have succeeded in keeping these things out of their consciousness. They've done this with an unconscious protection of themselves. And it isn't until they get older and that protective instinct gets poorer or their symptom gets worse that it begins to be apparent to them. Oh, good. And
Tweed's a little bit over 40 now.
Is she as old as that?
Yeah. And I would have thought that it would show up by now. I mean, I'm sure that, I don't know what's going to happen when she reaches 60 or 70, but she is just, the impression that I got of her when she arrived in my office, her face was very flat. The expression of her face was very flat, and her being and her body was something that stopped at her neck a lot. And
Thank you.
And she's found it to be a pretty joyful process of getting into it, as far as I could see. I would have, if I were in that body, I'd be racked with pain, but she isn't. I don't know.
You never know how people adjust. I mean, there's something about temperament that we don't know one solitary thing about yet. The way we protect ourselves, the way one person protects himself and the other person absolutely refuses to use that mechanism for protection. Mm-hmm. We don't know what this thing is. This comes under what the metaphysicists call karma. But what that is, I don't know, and I'm not...
It really is interesting because that concept or that event, that fact, often seems to contradict what we would expect, as in the case of Tweed or as in the case of several other clients that I could name that have such different left and right sides that you would expect them to act in a schizophrenic manner, and yet they don't. They have somehow held themselves together in the face of this discrepancy.
I don't know a thing about that. I mean, I know that it's there. I've seen it just as you've seen it. But I don't know a thing about what it is that gives them the guts to go on and really behave as though they were normal people.
Dr. Roth? Once we get, if we get the elbow balanced so that it's going out, it's pointing out, and it moves straight out and straight in, presumably,
Why don't you get your right elbow balanced that way?
yeah.
No, now, wait. Put your hand up the way you had it before on the, there, that's what I'm talking
Like
about.
this?
Yeah,
That's what I wanted to ask you about.
your hand.
Now, this is a balanced position?
It's a balanced position when, if you move the elbow, you can, without turning the arm, immediately move it straight out.
Without turning the arm? I mean, without turning it this way?
Look, if you have your elbow like this, can you move your elbow straight out without turning the arm?
Yes.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
I can't. I don't
like
feel that different from you.
Like this.
Watch her arm. She was doing it with her arm.
Now, Sydney, you're doing too much with the whole arm. Go back, go in and investigate the joint itself. No, you're going that wide, and you should go that wide to feel what's going on.
The others pulling forward through here. And not as much rolling as pulling forward, sure.
I still say I can do all kinds of things with my arm without moving my shoulder, but what you're doing is controlling this whole trip by turning your shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Drop your shoulder. Drop it. Lay your arm on the run on the chair. Now come in half an inch and see how you come and where you come to.
No, I'm using this.
Yes, you're not using down here.
Why don't you try that and see how well you get along with it? See, there's no use making rompers out of you if we can't teach you to think, other than as a layperson thinks. You know, the layperson thinks he's got to do this to move his arm.
So the rest of my question was, assuming that the elbow
You
is
fellas
balanced,
doing anything with that?
Yeah, it's trying.
Keep working on it. Oh, it's not easy. Hello. What did you do?
especially when we're changing.
You should remember to call
Not that I can work anymore.
Rosemary. Adrian?
That's Adrian.
See, she's the one who should remember it, not me. She should.
Dr. Rolf, I want to ask you about the mysterious antagonism of the pectoralis and the latissimus in the balanced elbow.
No. I wouldn't say they're antagonistic, I'd say they're cooperative myself. I've understood that one of them extends the elbow and the other one draws it in. So that's a cooperation rather.
Well, it's an agonist-antagonist
Yeah, okay,
relationship, that's what I mean.
The label doesn't matter that
Yes.
much. What about it?
And, well, also, yesterday you mentioned that one of them works from the outside and one from the inside of the arm.
Well, go and find the
Well, the insertions
Go find them.
are here and here. Here, right here, I can feel them in here.
So is it going to work at any place other than the insertion? I mean, where can it work?
Well, but to me, it feels like the insertions are both on the inside of the arm. So the latissimus is more
Have
to
you
the outside.
palpated it?
Got my finger on one right now.
Take a look at all this.
So if you turn your elbow out, both of those insertions come to the inside of the arm. To the medial edge of the humerus. Do they not? Insertion of both pectoralis and latissimus?
Well, certainly as your arm goes out, this is the muscle that does it. Yeah. Now wait a minute.
Let's look at the triceps.
Let your arm drop. Now do not move the upper part of the arm, but move the elbow a half an inch. That's what I'm talking about. Now drop it just by dropping it, not by moving it, but by dropping the holding. That's what I'm talking about. Now come in. Now feel what's going on in your back as you do this. Anybody over here got something to say?
Yeah, my upper rhomboid gets involved. The upper edge gets involved when I try playing with my elbow like that.
Your upper arm what?
The rhomboid up on the left side when I get the left elbow going out like that.
Yeah.
I can feel the action through that part of my back.
Now, use one of your usual gestures, one of these wide. Do you feel how you're bypassing? See, you're not involving the mechanism that you have. You bypass it. Now this is part of the story of great athletes. I don't know the rest of the story. I've never given much attention to it except to look at it and decide that it's so. Some of these people come into the world with an intuitive knowledge of this. And the rest of us throw ourselves around. But you see, each and every one of us has a very wide range of possibilities that we're not using in that physical body as well as in the mental body. Now, to what extent you want to teach this to the people that you're working with, I don't know. I do know it's harder to do than it is to just work on them and have them say, oh, that feels so much better. But to what extent you want to be teachers rather than doctors, that is the thing that's going to determine the answer to that question. Now you see, you can create a population which has much greater physical capacity if you can get a class of half-grown kids and really teach them to put attention into how they're doing things. And you see, they don't do it that way. They don't teach it that way. They just tell them to get out. Have you done it? No. Well, do it 10 more times. Come back then. Have you done it? No. Do it 100 more times. Have you done it? No. And this is the good old Persian method of teaching that Dr. What was her name? That German woman that came to Yale.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about
Madame Menzendy. She had been taught that way, and she brought that method of teaching with her because she didn't know any other. And so this thing got pretty well implanted into the American culture of physical education. And it's not my idea of physical education. It's physical repetition. Out to do the job. And it's much more a mental process than the other.
Dr. Rolfe, whenever my elbow is worked on, I always feel it in my lower back, and I never really understood why.
Do you now?
And, well, at the beginning of this class, I was talking to some people who had done a 6-day intensive with Michael Salison, and they had talked about the approximation of the two fields, as far as I could understand, but the elbow, that as the elbow hangs, it lies right next to the lower back, and that there's some crossover in the fields of the lower back and the elbow.
Well, no, I don't doubt it, but I think I would see it as a minor contributor to this.
And without I'm not sure I even understand that particular theory, but without that, no, I don't really understand the relationship between the elbow and the lower back.
Well, for one thing, where does the elbow what set of stuff does the elbow contribute? Goes from here to here, and from here you go to here by that one, and by that one, and then you change cars again, and you go by that one. But you see, if you have the right day post, it's very little changing of cars. The right tracks. You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I do see.
I don't see it as a direct connection. Although the fascial connections undoubtedly are unbroken. But the muscular connections as such are broken. Well, am I talking sense or am I talking nonsense? After all, it's the muscular connections.
Actually, the muscular connections aren't even that unbroken.
No, and if they're not, the fascial connections can't be unbroken.
Yeah.
But things lie next to each other, and they lie connecting with each other, and to sit down and complain because you can't get a through train is silly. If you get the train working properly, and somebody switches the car from one train to the other, and you don't have to change trains, you're doing all right. Has this contributed to your confusion, or has it deepened it?
What does the triceps do?
All the above, Dr. Earl.
Dr. Earl, what does the triceps do in this picture?
I don't know.
Which train is that? Which line
I don't
is that?
know. You go play with that. That's not my department. I don't see that as my department. Yeah.
I feel that the arms are, that we are neglecting how much of a balancing agent our arms are. At the center of gravity, if you really look at the pictures, at that, whenever you change that center of gravity of the whole body, the position of where the arms are hanging so much more. So the relationship to that spine is good.
There's a lot to what you're saying, Sidney. This is a smart observation.
Yay, Cindy. I immediately thought of the guy walking in the tightrope, and of course, just a small little movement of that bar affects his entire balance. And that would be true for our arms too.
That's why he uses such a long bar.
See, a lot of those people could teach us a lot of things, but it never occurs to us to go to them to learn. Those people really know. They know in the real world. They don't know in the theoretical world.
About balance.
But their life depends on their knowing it in the real world. And I agree with you, Sidney, that is a field where spending some time thinking may yield you quite a lot of certainty as to what's going on.
Be interested to go and watch some people doing gymnastics and things, and how they use the arms for balancing, where they put them in regard to various positions.
Or just watch your photograph.
Oh, and photographs, right. I mean, more subtly, all the way down.
What people are these?
Athletes, gymnasts, moving very slowly, and you'll see the very slow movements to the arms.
Yeah, the balance beam work is a good example of that kind of thing.
Same in ballet.
Yeah.
But it's not just there. I mean, they serve just as much of a balancing purpose for us, just walking from here to the dining room.
Now, wait a minute. Did you see what you do automatically? You just deliberately throw your elbows out of the picture.
Well, it's the fold of the chair, Dr. Reed.
It is nothing of the sort. It is the fault of Sidney.
Gravity's a little crooked in that corner. Have you ever been to a place in the earth where gravity is different?
I just thought of that.
There's a place,
There's Santa Cruz.
well, there's a place in Virginia where they advertise it. You go into this house and you sit on a chair and it's on the wall, and you walk. They've got the house all turned around, and they claim that not only is the house built differently, but actually gravity is different there. And there's a place in Santa Cruz.
The place in Santa Cruz where all the trees grow at an angle. There's several places like that throughout the world. They think it has something to do with the lines of magnetic flux around the earth as they cross. You have like holes in the gravitational field.
Is that like magnetic domes that they talk about in dowsing?
Oh, no, that I don't know.
No,
But I know that if you hold the key on a string, for instance, it will go that way.
Really?
And then when you walk, you feel out of balance.
The force of the power of it is just amazing.
One in Santa Cruz is quite large. I mean, it's 80, 90 square feet.
You know what it's called?
Yeah, the mystery spot.
Mystery spot.
You said something, Sydney, which I didn't hear.
I said the force field of that is incredibly strong.
You mean you've been there?
Yes. And it's very interesting because I think that if we weren't so used to experiencing, if we came from a gravity-free situation, that would be like similar to what gravity would feel like. And maybe I'm wrong in this, but that was my
That's how I felt in Virginia.
experience.
Yeah, in that place in Virginia.
Where is this in Virginia?
It's somewhere on that Blue Ridge.
I'd be interested. I'm going to drive down through.
Are you?
Yeah.
Well, you can't. I find out for you, Tom, the exact location, but it's on that Blue Ridge Parkway.
Is it?
That would be a
Something like that.
fantastic.
It's easy to get
There's
to.
seven of them
Then.
in the world or something.
And the minute you walk on that hill, the minute you take a few steps onto that hill, I had the same feeling of being drawn heavier down into the earth. That it seemed, the gravity seemed to increase.
There's one in Finhorn.
There's one in what?
Finhorn.
Oh, is there?
And it's only about 3 feet square.
Oh, you're talking about the power place up on the top of the ridge.
Yeah.
Ah, I've been up there. I didn't find it so remarkable.
Well, this isn't like, that one's very small. These others are quite large. Trees are misshapen, and I was in Santa Cruz.
And you have to
and I
stand
rode
at an
along.
angle?
I used to always carry a key on a string. When when I used to do a lot of diving, if you've been under the water for about an hour and a quarter at a deep depth, you'd lose your perspective as to where gravity was. And a fish would swim by and you'd be on your side, and you'd think that you were belly down to the floor, and the only way you could do it was to watch your bubbles, and after a while that got kind of mysterious, so I used to take a key out of my pocket. If the key was going that way, I knew I had to go this way. And I pulled this key out of my pocket, and it was at an angle like that. And it was really strange.
Where was that?
In Santa Cruz.
Oh.
I was having a hard time standing up to where I wanted to stand up.
angle?
About like that.
Oh, it's a big angle. You really have to lean into it. I mean, just way over.
You see the horizon. The horizon hasn't changed. The trees are
Well, you
gone.
see, it would be a right interesting
down
little
to
piece of research if some of you people that knew about golfing would go into some of those areas and see what you felt.
Maybe we could use it to reorient some of that problem.
One of the things that
Maybe we could.
One of
Knock me on the possibilities. Yeah.
One of the things that they do as an introduction, just as you're getting on the periphery, is they'll pair you off. They'll have two people, and they'll have you stand here on, I mean, it looks perfectly level. One person standing here and the other one here, and they'll say which one looks taller. And you'll say, oh, the one on that side. Okay, now change places. Which one looks taller? I just got shorter and that person looks taller. It's very peculiar.
What are we talking about?
In Santa
In
Cruz.
Santa Cruz, what is Santa Cruz?
I would think that the state physical researchers would have gone out there to find out what the hell's
They
going on.
absolutely deny its existence for the most part. I've seen no real theses written about it. They just don't know what to do. And
You mean they just pretend it doesn't exist?
well, there's no really anything well written about it.
Well, you see, what they do is they apparently direct their attention, and in directing their attention, try to direct the attention of anybody that's reading their stuff away to another problem. Which is how all of us solve our insolubles. We just live with the doggone things.
Has anyone looked at that angle as compared to the, kind of fields?
Yes, and I don't. I know that they've found 7 or 8 of those worldwide now.
Where are those things reported, Andy? Do you know
I
that?
have no idea, but I would guess that some geophysical,
Yeah, they would have to.
maybe the United States Department of Geophysics would know.
Logical.
I didn't know there was one in Virginia.
Yeah. It's a whole mountain, I mean, it's a whole hill.
It is?
Yeah, it's a whole hill.
It had entered my mind when
It's odd that they would be willing to run the parkway across that.
Well, Dr. Rolfe,
at least the one in Virginia, they commercialized it very heavily, and they've obviously built the structures, the buildings and all the rest of it, way out of proportion, so that to demonstrate this thing, so it's sort of a gimmick. And the change in the force of gravity, I'm sure that there would be people who could go on that hill and feel no difference. And I felt the difference. Now, who knows? Am I suggestible? Is it because of, I don't even know. But what I'm saying is that the difference is not strong enough to really cause a danger to traffic or anything like that.
Well, yes, it's not strong enough to cause a danger to traffic, but this they don't know in the beginning, and they don't know what forces affect it and what will may strengthen it and so forth and so forth.
I disagree. You're not allowed by airplane to fly over the Great Pyramid, for instance, because it takes the magnetic instruments on an airplane and drives them crazy.
But that's not true about this place in Virginia.
I wonder.
The one in Santa Cruz, they've left quite as it was. The way they noticed it was that someone had built, a person who owned the property many years back, 50, 60 years ago, had built a little cottage or shed up on the hill, and it started leaning and sliding down the hill. They didn't know quite what it was, and then they really started looking at the trees, and they went, wait a minute, all the trees are very peculiar. And they've left it they really haven't built anything commercial around it. One of the interesting things that the man did say was that animals will not go into it.
Birds won't fly through it.
Really?
Yeah. And you cannot walk in the middle of it and not know you're being affected by it. It's impossible.
Really?
It's very strong.
And this is not in a building, but this is like on the ground.
On the ground, and it's like you walk through a door and immediately are affected by it.
It's a very sharp delineation.
Yes.
Not a gradual.
Well, now you see all of this material is distinctly of interest to people who are claiming to be working through the medium of the gravitational field. What we should do, really, is to get some of you people that are fairly well along in the understanding of roping to go into those areas and to try to work there and see what you find.
Because that had entered my mind one time. One of my clients had said they went to the mystery spot, and I hadn't thought about it in years, and I thought, wouldn't that be interesting to do some sessions in the middle of that? But my thought was that I remembered how uncomfortable I felt. I didn't know that I could do the work, but it would be fun to try.
And you didn't know how the other fellow would feel, and you didn't know whether the fellow that you picked as your model was going to be a sensitive or an insensitive individual. All of these things. But I think that it's quite important that any and all of you understand that there are these kind of problems around which we are doing just what everyone else does. We are talking about something else. When we come near that field, we turn our head away and start to talk about a different subject. And the day is going to have to come when we look this thing square in the face and think about it. But we can't do that unless all of us understand that there is a problem here, that there is something interesting here.
Well, one theory that had been put forth was that spot had once been the North Pole, and that there had been a shift in the Earth.
Well, shucks, if there are that many spots that have been the North Pole, that Earth must have been just dancing.
Right, there must have been a lot of spots between that and the now North Pole until it became that. You know why?
Well, there's a whole period of a very sudden shift.
That was the attitude of the...
Yeah, there is that.
That's the attitude of why the woolly mammoths were attracted.
Right.
And
And what
instantly
about the evidence
preserved.
that Velikovsky had behind his theories? Is any of that accurate at all?
I can't refute all of Velikovsky's evidence, but as far as I can read, that whole cataclysm thing would had caused much more than the simple changes that he was talking about.
I don't know about his theory, but the facts that he's basing on are...
Will you talk a little louder, please?
I was saying that the facts, if they are facts, and I don't know that they are, but the information that Velikovsky was, founding his theory on is very interesting stuff.
I'm sure it's very interesting stuff. And I'm coming from belief also that from my reading of astronomers, I tend towards the science, towards a rationalistic type of thing. But anyway, that it won't stand up astronomically.
Well,
according to a lot of other readings.
Is it Velikovsky? The thing I like to buy is that the crust of the Earth is floating on a layer of material that has a piezoelectric effect. That when it's in a field, is solid, and when that field disappears, the layer suddenly gets fluid and liquid. And that the Earth somehow has gone into a null field place or a canceled out field.
Well, he was
That layer has gotten fluid, and suddenly the weight of the polar caps with the Earth spinning came out like that.
That's something that needs to be said.
Yeah, this is, because you're touching on this, another thing in Santa Cruz is that it is like a solid whirlpool or tornado. It definitely has that vortex that's going right into the center of it. Mm-hmm. And when I was there, I couldn't remember what way everything's supposed to turn in the physical universe, whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise. And I was asking myself that because the whole place seems so reversed. That my assumption, my feeling was that vortex is probably turning in the opposite direction from what is normal.
Well, I'm sure that there's a clockwise rotation in the northern hemisphere.
That's right.
Counterclockwise in the southern. And during the southern.
And this was counterclockwise.
So it would be southern?
No, it's in the northern hemisphere, but my feeling was that it was in reverse. I couldn't remember it. So if it is clockwise in the north, this place was counterclockwise, so it is in reverse, which was very interesting.
If you watch water go down the drain in Australia, it's different than it is here.
Is that really true?
Yes.
I've heard that.
I've seen
Supposed to be reversed. Who's seen it?
Well, now let's come back to Walking for change, huh? We've had our trips to the Wild Blue Yonder today.
Yeah.
Okay, can I have another trip? This is a different trip to the Wild Blue Yonder. It'll only take
Well, let's hear it.
I spent an instructive couple of hours with a guy named Dr. Schoberg over at the University Museum yesterday afternoon.
Here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, because I had heard you, we had talked about Egyptian art.
Yeah, right.
Dodge mentioned to me that you had mentioned Sumerian art, and I wasn't familiar with Sumerian art, so I went to see this guy who knows about Sumerian.
Do they have a good exhibit over here?
I didn't see an exhibit. I saw a lot of books.
Uh-huh.
And
what I would like to do, let me mention this here, and maybe you'll deal with it. What I would like to do is to get copies of a lot of those books and tear out the pictures and put them together so as to show the way in which these various cultures have modified human bodies with their ideas. You see, a Sumerian statue will show you a different type of human body from a French statue. Of course, there's a certain time change in there, but I'm sure one could go out and find it on the same time level.
Oh, it's very interesting to follow this thing through from the, at least for me.
Well, it would be very interesting to me, and if it were possible, to get a hold of those books, and as I say, to wreck the books and put together one book that showed how men's ideas have insisted on modifying men's bodies. I think that this would be of great value to us as authors.
The early Sumerian statues had very the relationship between
very right-angled joints.
Very right-angled joints, and not quite so stylized as the early Egyptian stuff.
And I don't think it was because those Sumerians couldn't stylize or couldn't make right-angled joints. It couldn't represent them. I don't think
because the interesting thing is that in the 4th millennia BC, from 4000 to 3000 BC, they are not so. You would expect that you would come from a more primitive toward a more.
Well, you see, I would like to get hold of somebody. It could be you're the man to do it. I would like to get hold of somebody that would devote 5 years, 10 years to getting this material together and publishing it. This would be a very great contribution.
That's right. He's a good one for because he's going around the world too, so we'll have a chance to.
Tom, can I see those photocopy things you're doing?
No, I really want that.
have really anterior lumbars, and
That's right.
not a
That's right.
not the. And then they get into sacred art, and then they start making this thing part of their sacred art. And all of a sudden, the thing lines up in the familiar way of the Egyptian statues. I think you've all seen those the lion-headed. The man head with the wings of a lion. About the same time that you get that, you start getting these right angled, and they're softer bodies than the Egyptians. It's a different thing, and I can't put it all in words. And I brought a couple of things, very poor Xeroxes here, just so you could see. There was this guy named Gudea, and he was the Golden Age king of the Assyrian. Sumerian Empire, and he himself is portrayed in statues as being rather short-waisted, but his son, and at the time of his son, the art really hits its height. And the most interesting thing about these statues, the most interesting detail about these statues, and I'll pass these things around so that you can see, is that the little toe and the little finger are just about as long. I mean, if you look at mine, and if you look at most everybody's in the room, the little finger is quite a bit shorter than any of the others.
Yes.
And in all of these statues, the little toe and the little finger is just about as long, as represented as being equal in size to the rest of them. And you can see that this guy is very flat on his feet. I don't mean that he has flat feet, but that he's very well grounded. And that was something that I didn't even see in the Egyptian art. The Egyptian art has that folding little finger. And,
Well, you see, I would like to see all of this material collected. I mean, I think that this should be the function of Rolfus in this culture, to collect this kind of material and show what has gone on and imply that these kind of changes do to a certain extent account for the kind of changes that you see in the external culture. Now, these changes must have occurred first inside their heads, namely in terms of thinking. They must have. Now, I don't know who on what far planet put that change of thinking into their head, but it's hard to understand how that change of thinking comes about spontaneously without an impact of some sort. But at any rate, be that as it may, I certainly would think that it would be very valuable, not merely to Rolfus, but to the world as a whole, to get this sort of stuff collected.
Does anybody know if through the
Any of you that go around and ask people for money and people say, well, what are you going to do with money? Don't tell them this because they won't believe it. So here's one good place to put it. I'm sorry. No.
Okay, does anybody know through examination of mummies and things like that whether the physical bodies of the people went through significant postural changes as they were
I don't
changing
think
their
we could see from a
representation
mummy
of...
because you see as they mummify them, they change the body. I mean the mere fact of embalming, the mere fact of pulling out the fluids from the body and substituting other fluids and so forth, one would expect would change that body. I
just wondered if there's any way that you could tell, through the spinal structure, what was left, anything like that, whether there would be any...
I don't think that anybody has put attention on it. And I don't think you could do it without you had the backing of a certain rather generous sum of money to allow you to travel here, there, and the other place. If I wanted to do a job like that, I would go to London and haunt the British Museum for a while. That is the place. And also the Museum of Berlin, but I think the London Museum could probably do a fairly good job for you and you wouldn't have the problem of
See,
language.
the question wouldn't be just whether the art is changing, but whether the people changed it.
I know, but let's see what the artists do. Now, not every artist in the 20th century, for instance, follows one pattern. And I wouldn't think that every artist in the first century BC would follow one pattern. They'll follow what they see.
Back in history, the forms were more traditional to the period than they are
Who
today.
says so?
Well, looking back, like music in the Baroque period had very set rules.
That's true, but that isn't looking that far back in history, and furthermore, that's music, and that's not visual art. I mean, these visual arts are copying a life pattern.
I'm just saying Greek statues look like Greek statues.
I hear what you're saying, but on the other hand, Greek statues probably look like Greek youths.
Mm-hmm. as opposed to
I
Egyptian
wouldn't doubt
statues.
for a minute that what is that wonderful Greek statue of the snakes and the men?
Laocoon.
Yeah, the Laocoon. I wouldn't doubt for a minute that that was representing actual Greek bodies.
Anybody who's interested in this, I would like to mention a book which a psychiatrist from New York did primarily on women, but started with the earliest primitive statues of women, like the Venus of Württemberg, is it? And on through the Earth Mothers and on through. He also brought in a lot of literature and stories, but all the way through it in each culture, Japan and so forth. He worked a lot with their statuary and their art forms. His name is Wolfgang Lederer. It's called The Fear of Women. And it kind of, I think it shows a format if anyone's interested in really looking through
Führer or fear?
fear, F-E-A-R, The Fear of Woman.
See, all this stuff can and should be brought together and will throw a light on some of what we are trying to do. We'll throw a light on whether we can do it. We'll throw a light on whether it's worth doing, whether we'll ever be able to get backing, cultural backing for our ideas of the possibility of changing people. You see, people come to me and they say, well, you claim that by changing bodies you're going to change their temperaments. I say, yes, I do claim that. Well, are they going to be better? And I don't say to them, well, go in and look at what's going on in the Rolf organization.
That's nice that you don't.
You're not a
I don't dare. I don't dare, but it's something that you people could think about.
It's one of most officials coming up.
And let us not make groundless claims. I mean, if we're going to make claims, for heaven's sake, let's be able to bring forth the evidence that our claim is valid. I'm not sure about it one way or another. I'm not dead sure about it. I certainly know that you can take little Georgie, who is a holy terror, and you can make him a terror instead of a holy terror by roughing him.
Speaking of holy terrorists, we have one outside.
Holy terror.
I heard of them.
I one time had a student in England who had a kid who had quite a bad temper. He had taught this kid to go and kick the door when he got into a rage. You should have seen that door.
You would think the London Museum, the British Museum, would be the place to...
Yes, unless you're a good scholar of German. If you can handle German really like a native, then the Berlin Museum, I don't doubt, will be able to offer you a great deal. But barring that, if you've got to handle your questions and answers in English, then the London Museum is the outstanding place. The London Museum is a gorgeous place. I don't mean physically, but I mean in terms of the service they yield. Wonderful.
The Museum of Natural History in Chicago has tremendous stature. That's right close by. We really have some time.
I doubt that they've got as much ancient material. You see, the London Museum was able to draw directly on Egypt in the days when England
When the English were out. Well, I'm just saying it's someplace and it's close by where you could start.
Well, yes. The other place is to try to get somebody to give you a grant to start elsewhere. Actually, you can live in London a good deal cheaper than you can live here, I think.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Not if you're paying taxes over there.
Well, the point is you can be poverty-stricken abroad without everybody looking down their nose at you. They can't do that on this side of the ocean.
Dr. Rolf, I was looking at Lockhart this morning and I noticed they say, this is something I never thought about, that it's easier for the spine to extend than it is, extension of the spine is easier and has a greater potential for doing that than flexion.
I don't agree with them.
Well,
I think the answer is in the bodies of every one of us. All of us tend to flex.
right, that's what I was thinking about. And Lockhart explains that through the flexion mainly takes place not in between the vertebra, but actually at the hip. And that in the extension of the spine, that it's
Well,
actually...
I'm willing to listen to Lockhart, but up to this point, I don't agree with him.
Well, then I also noticed that they say that the bulk of the post-vertebral musculature is twice as large as the pre-vertebral musculature, vertebral musculature, and that's reversed in the primates. And in the gorilla and in the primates, of course, they're much more.
And they think that the bulk of that prevertebral musculature in the primates is what keeps them in this.
They didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. And I'm wondering if a lot of our tendency toward flexion might be, what's the word?
Anthropological?
Might be phylogenic.
Well, as you all know, the cell starts as a spherical thing to begin with.
Right.
So that just from the time that you get from out of that sphere, that organism, whatever it is working to get somewhere other than a sphere. And obviously that original tendency toward sphericity is still going to persist.
Mm-hmm. Also, the beam of the spine in a primate doesn't curve like a human spine. It arches. Almost a perfect arch over, which would mean that everything would hang in front of that beam.
Oh, yeah.
Say it again, Andy.
The spine of a primate, a gorilla, even a chimpanzee, is a curve. It curves forward. It doesn't have the intercurves that we have.
Secondary.
It doesn't have the secondary
How
curves
far
that we
back
have.
does that go? Do you know? I often thought about this and wondered, but I've never.
What that would mean is that if it's curved in a forward arch like that, which would drop them forward, then everything would have, from that beam, it would all have to hang forward.
All right, but what I'm saying is how far back in evolutionary evidence does that go? How far back in terms of years and in terms of species? It's so easy to throw words around, and then you have to begin to look for the evidence.
Well, describing what you talked about, that jumped into my mind. I saw that slide that I have in my presentation that shows the spine of that gorilla. And then when I thought of what you said about the spine being an upended beam, it made sense that everything would be in front of the spine, the vertebral.
Jim and I have trouble with that word. Well, what did interest me was that it did seem at first contrary to what we see, which is flexion of the spine so much, and the pulling down in front and the up and back. It just made me think that was possibly more something coming from our evolutionary past than necessarily I want to use the word structural, but not in the term that we use it. Because of the arrangement of the musculature. It seems like the arrangement of the musculature is made for extension, for that spine to extend, as opposed to our evolutionary forebears, which was made more for flexion. Not sure what it all means, but it
No, I'm not sure what it means either.
It did. It did shed some light on what I was thinking.
What we need, you see, is to interest some people in museums. Like the Museum of Natural History in New York, like the one in Chicago, like the one in London. We need to interest people who have immediate access to that kind of information. Someday we'll get it,
To me, I think we're leaving out an important link here, and when we discuss this, we need to look at, in terms of ontogenesis paralleling phylogenesis, at the evolution of the individual, of the toddler. And I think that may shed some light on it, because they've got that same, I thought a lot about this, that same inability to get the flexion out of those lower three major joints. But they don't seem to really have a C-curve from the start. This seems to be here, and then these uppers they haven't got the normal upper curves, but there is this. Whereas the gorillas, I think, are more of a C-curve in general.
And as a child, a little toddler extends rather than flexes.
That's one of the
But it extends maybe from this level rather than, the whole, I'm not sure, but I think we
maybe
need to
is most observable in extension when he's sitting down. The child
Or
sits
lying
down.
down.
How about when he's lying on his belly? They're always pushing their heads up, right? It's almost like they're starting to think on that lumbar curve at that age. I mean, it's curious that you don't see that in a young baby. You see extension rather than flexion. Really?
Well, the young baby is always trying to overcome the flexion that he's been
They've
in.
gotten the lower, through the lower joints.
The young baby, I mean, all the time he's in utero, he's in flexion. There's no way that he can extend, and when he does extend, Mama complains.
Maybe that's why.
So that his whole orientation there must needs be, if he's going to develop into a man, to extend.
In the first 6 months during
God knows what instinct is, I don't know, you don't need to ask me. There's
The
a lot of
experience
things
that I've had recently with a 2-year-old that I'm working with is that from the hips up, there's a lot of extension. There's a very posterior lumbar that really stretching that spine, and from the hips down, it's all flexion. He's starting.
It has to flex because those three joints aren't ready to support the body yet. It
With
has
the
to
knees
flex.
all bent. And now that I started to get some length into those joints, his back is relaxing.
good. How much have you done with it?
3 sessions.
Oh, well, good. I mean, good, you're going somewhere, but you haven't had time to get anywhere.
Yeah, but I mean, already, he looks taller, but the height isn't coming from his back, it's coming through his legs.
How does he act in terms of maturity?
What happened is that the parents reported the terrible twos had gone away. The terrible twos. That his crankiness and easily irritable, at times, has lessened quite a bit, particularly after the first session. But then after the second, he seemed to start to go through a kind of a cleaning out. He was getting colds, and then after the third, the colds all cleared up. Started to clear up. So
that's good. Are you doing predominantly children's work?
No, I'm working with about a half dozen kids right now.
You got fairly good records of it, have you?
Yeah, I'm getting pictures of the kids.
I don't know how we can present this work, but present it we have to, this work with children.
It's hard to present because they don't stand the same way for those photographs.
So you can't.
I just talked to
stand up.
that woman this morning that's an illustrator,
Yeah.
and she's going to call me back later tonight. And supposedly Ron Thompson is supposed to have those pictures to me by the 1st of July. And I'm asking her to help me put it together into a publishable form.
Well, this is fine if she happens to have had the kind of experience that
She does that for her father, who's a surgeon.
has nothing to do with publishing books.
She publishes his papers.
All I can say is I hope so. I've had such high hopes and they've been dashed so many times.
Well, I mean, I'm going to find somebody to do it because that's the latest.
Well, we mean somewhere, some robber will find somebody to do it, and I hope it's you because that's near home.
But we've got all those excellent pictures. And all what you need is something better than Polaroids. We'll see. Yeah.
What's that like?
Amazing photograph.
With the manuscript? It's upstairs.
That's the guy. Well, you have a potential.
Well, you see, if we really had a definite model in our minds, we could set up a children's class and set up and get someone like Ron Thompson, but not Ron Thompson who is so involved that he can't put in this kind of time, to just do nothing but get records and then publish those records, and then maybe we'd have something. And this could be done, but you see, what we have to do is to have.
We already have 9 children we have pictures of.
And they're good. we've got some changes in 3 weeks that are a little startling.
Why doesn't the world get startled?
Well, we haven't published them yet. So when we do,
Ron thinks that he's saving money by having it done by somebody else, and I kept trying to convince Ron that you don't save money when it takes more time.
That's right.
He didn't learn that one yet.
I'd like to take a break now.
Yeah, I think this is a good idea.
This morning's dictionary is for instinct. One is an inborn pattern of activity and response common to a given biological stock, innate impulse or natural inclination, particularly natural inclination or tendency, a natural aptitude or gift for something, natural intuitive power, that's instinct. And the other definition of instinct is urged or animated from within, infused or filled with some active urged or animated.
Instinct is intuition, and you know the intuition is so we couldn't know.
Well,
As a step.
he did. Well, we're talking about how heavy he was. He also had a lot better control than when he was walking.
It may be Bob, you know, I didn't see him in the early stages of the game.
Steve, how would you like to get up and take a walk between you and the door? Just nice and slow and... Sharon?
You hear it?
Oh, absolutely.
He's
You'll be right in the way of the train from there. Okay.
I can't imagine any human being being willing to put that much energy, to throw that much energy out. See, what he's doing is he's nailing down the floorboards with his feet.
Especially his right one.
Especially his right one.
His whole body goes out of it.
And I would look for that largely in the hips. The general pelvic region. So is he yours?
No, he's Amy's. And this is the second advanced barrel.
Only the second?
Yeah.
Yes. And last time you worked on the top half.
Uh-huh.
There, that's great.
Well, Mary met Jane. She hadn't seen her for a long, long time. So you still married to John? This is, oh, yeah. Well, what's the matter? Well, you know, I'm not married to look like a good God, and now looks like a goddamn freak.
What about Dorothy Norfolk?
She was telephoning, and somebody was ralphing in the room, and of course the ralphie was screaming, and she could hear the operator on the other end of the telephone just drawing her breath and wonder whether she should send for the cops, whether it was murder being done or what it was. And Dorothy, quick-witted sister, said, "Oh, don't worry about it, operator. They're just having charades."